made up of both trustees, Rushmore Cervantes, and then we've got three community members that are serving as well. Ken Kenny is the one that's online right now, and we've got two others who might join us. This is a standing committee, and as such, I'm sorry, Diego, you're ready to go on the recording, right?
Yes, I went ahead and started live.
This is a standing committee, and as such, we function under the Brown Act rules. So the first thing that we'll do is take a quick roll call of the members, and since we're on Zoom, we'll do it with an auditory I'm here or present, whatever. So we'll start with Rushmore Cervantes.
Here.
And Kim Kenny.
Here.
And let the record show, Diego, that both Amy Lyford and Jim Vitale are not on the line yet. I'm Terry Andrews, and I'm present as well, so we have a quorum and we can proceed. So first order of business, is there any reordering of the agenda items? And can we adopt the agenda as it stands?
I have no changes, Terry.
Okay. So if we could get a motion for both of those, both reordering of the agenda items and the adoption of the agenda, I'd appreciate it.
I'll move.
And I hope you'll second. Okay.
Second.
Thank you. So all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Actually, we should, well, let the record show that all of the members voted in the affirmative. And then, Diego, do we have any public comment on non-agenda items?
We do not. We don't have it either through our forms that are available online or through our email at Hello Altadena. I'll keep you updated if anything changes, but so far none.
Okay. And I did.
No one has tried to call me, Terry, FYI.
I'm sorry.
No one's tried to call me. They can also live call in.
Okay. And then I think we covered the consent calendar as well on the one motion that was made. Is that right, Diego? So we didn't. Okay. So on the consent calendar, we need to get a motion to approve the items that are there, which are the minutes from the last meeting. Is there any discussion regarding the minutes or any corrections? And if so, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, please. Well, let's take a roll call vote. Member Cervantes?
Yes.
Member Kenny?
Yes.
And Member Andrews votes in the affirmative. So I think we're done with all of that preamble business. And we're going to launch right into section 5, which is new business. And Nikki, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you to let us know what's going on.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to announce that we have signed agreements with both our municipal advisory firm, Urban Futures, Inc., and also our Bond and Disclosure Council with BB&K, and I have representatives from both with us today. So we have Doug Anderson with Urban Futures that Nicole and I have already been working closely with to talk through some of the beginning stages of the bond issuance process. And then also we have Nora O'Brien, who is a familiar person in that she helped us with the CFD formation work that we did last summer. So I wanted to introduce both of them to you, and I'll let them speak a little bit about the work that they do, and then give them an opportunity to talk more about the bond issuance process and potential timeline and things like that. So I'll turn it over, I guess, to you, Doug, first.
Great. Thank you, Nikki, and good afternoon, everyone. We're excited to be on board. We're looking forward to working with the district and the finance team on this important financing for the district. I'm going to talk a little bit just kind of about some of our schedule considerations and the process, and then turn it over to Nora to sort of talk about some of the legal considerations. We have had a few conversations prior to this meeting. We did talk this morning about some things. Mainly, of course, we're waiting for the underwriter and the special task consultant to get on board, so we'll have a full team, but there are some things we can talk about and be working towards as we're waiting to get the full group together. Once we have everyone on board, and I believe with the schedule you've laid out, that'll be early July, we'll be working to prepare a rating presentation. This district and its CFD are a prime candidate to get a very nice bond rating. Typically, that'll be from Standard & Poor's. There are other bond rating firms out there, but that's usually who we'll target. We'll get input on that from the underwriter once they're on board. And the underwriter, by the way, is the banking firm that will be selling the bonds. Our special tax consultant, as you know, who helped you with the formation of the district, they will continue that type of duty. On the bond issue specifically, they will be preparing the latest information tables that bond buyers will be interested in seeing. We have sort of an interesting timing issue. We have new assessed valuations that come out in August. Depending on how early they're available, we may wait until we get those to give that to Standard & Poor's for them to look at. They'll certainly, even if we talk to them beforehand, they'll certainly be interested in those new numbers that'll come out sometime in August. Also, with the ratings process, once we have a nice bond rating, which we anticipate, we should be going out to get bond insurance as well. That'll be a separate function. It can move along the same timeline as the rating process. The bond insurers will provide bond insurance and lend their higher rating to the bond issue. So for instance, if the district has a standalone rating of a AA minus, we would have the bond insurers who have a higher rating, AA plus or higher, and we would lend you would basically purchase their rating, and they'll put their stamp of approval on the issue. Those are some of the considerations for the early process, and I'll let Nora will talk shortly here about some of the legal considerations. Once we get a rating and have hopefully bond insurance, then we can talk about marketing the bonds and getting them ready to sell. We're anticipating this will be a negotiated sale. That means we will negotiate the price with the one underwriter. It's really better in this type of a market. Large cities with large GO issues, sometimes we'll do a public sale that is more of a bid process where you have different underwriters bidding. In this case, we're going to select an underwriter based on their best bid idea when they present their proposal and other factors, but mainly the cost. And they will provide us with their lowest cost, and we'll pick the firm we think is the best fit and work with Nikki and staff on that. Once we have them on board, they'll be the group that'll be selling the bonds. So then from then on, we'll be working with them and getting their input. Looking at the schedule, I'm thinking we're probably going to be doing the rating process in July and August, probably sell the bonds, meaning put them out for the public to buy sometime in September, and hopefully close our issue maybe in October. That's sort of in flux at this point. We'll get more input when we have the whole team on board. We'll also be keeping an eye on the market. Interest rates right now are fairly stable. They are kind of bouncing around, but within a small range. We don't anticipate any major movements. If we feel like things are moving quickly, perhaps if they start ticking upwards at an alarming rate, we can try and accelerate our schedule and get into the market sooner. So those are just some kind of the initial conversations we've had, some of the considerations. I think I'm going to have Nora talk about some of the legal considerations, and then afterwards we're happy to answer your questions about the process. So Nora, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nora O'Brien, for those of you that haven't met me. Oops, sorry, and I'm having some computer Zoom issues, so I'm on my phone with my computer in front of me. And like Doug said, we're really, really happy to be working with the district on this. I think so much blood, sweat, and tears went into the formation of it. So it's very exciting to start to see the process come to fruition and think about the district getting the dollars to do the projects that it has in its plan. So really excited to get started and get working on this. I thought, I guess, not to delve into too many details, but to kind of give a high level overview of the legal documentation that goes along with the bond issuance process, I think would be a good place to start. And then as Doug said, we're both available here now to answer any questions, and then always available to answer questions as they come up as we get more into the process. Because I think, as you'll see, it's easy to get kind of lost in the details. So those details are important and good to ask questions about. But for now, I'll stick to kind of a high level documents that go along with the bond issuance, and then happy to answer any questions that come up. One item that I believe we at least mentioned in preliminary meetings with the district when we formed the CFD is that, is that the government code, there's an entity called the California Debt and Investment Advisory Commission, and you're required to about no later than 30 days prior to the sale of any debt, you submit a report of proposed debt issuance. And the government code section changed, I believe it was effective January 1st of 2017. So there's a little certification on that report now that we as bond counsel fill out the report for the CFD that requires an issuer to check the box that it has adopted local debt policies concerning the use of debt, and that debt issuance is in compliance with those local debt policies. So when we formed the district, we adopted local goals and policies relating to community facilities districts and talked about whether or not we should adopt the debt policy at the time of formation or wait until the time of debt issuance. And we ultimately decided that it would be better to wait until closer to the debt issuance. So that is a preliminary item that will need to be approved. And BB&K and Urban Futures can work on a draft of that, and we can get that going, prior to when the ultimate documentation comes before the board for approval, so that policy is in place and we don't have to think about it. So that's a preliminary item. And then in terms of the legal documentation for the debt issuance, the working group will start working on draft documents once the full group gets on board. And ultimately, it will lead to a resolution to be considered by the board. And that resolution is generally referred to as the Resolution of Issuance, and it will authorize the issuance of the bonds. And as part of that resolution, forms of certain documents, which will be presented in substantially final form, subject to any, small revisions that are approved after the board meeting, will be approved. And as Doug mentioned, like the bond insurance, or we discussed briefly on the phone on the call this morning, possibly using a bond insurer as a surety instead of a reserve. And this is kind of going into the details, but all of those action items will be part of this resolution of issuance, giving the authorization to apply for municipal bond insurance and a surety policy. And then the basic legal documents will be approved. So fiscal agent agreement, which will describe the terms of the bonds and include basically like how the bonds are administered on a going forward basis. And that would be with the CFD and then with a bank. And that was another thing, Nikki, I just thought of. I wasn't sure if there was an RFP for fiscal agent services, or if that can be done under something else. So that was just something I flagged as I was going through just basic documentation that is required. And then there'll be a preliminary official statement, and that is the document that discloses all material information to potential investors. So it will go over the source of repayment for the bonds, the special taxes, the use of the bond proceeds, talk about the project. It will describe the formation of the community facilities district, and it will basically just show investors what they're getting if they ultimately decide to purchase the bonds. And it, you know, it must not contain material misstatements or omissions and must be sufficiently complete to allow a potential investor to make an investment decision without independent investigation. So we can dive into to all of the securities law rules, you know, once we get closer to that time, and we can, you know, make sure that the district is aware of all their obligations under that document, because it is the issuer's document. And it's called a preliminary official statement. And then once the bond's price, the maturities and interest rates and amounts and all of that gets added in, and then it becomes a final official statement. And then there will also be approved as part of that resolution of issuance, a bond purchase agreement. And that would be the agreement between the CFD and the underwriter that's selected, which authorizes the issuance and sale of the bonds by negotiation to that underwriter. Oh, sorry, one more item. A continuing disclosure, I believe it will be a continuing disclosure agreement, and the district will have a dissemination agent. Rule 15C212 that was promulgated by the SEC under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 requires that an underwriter reasonably determine that an issuer has committed to provide continuing disclosures to investors, including notices of certain specified material events, as well as updating information that is contained in the official statement, and, you know, audited financials, if any, are prepared. So the commitment to provide this ongoing disclosure so that the underwriter can sell the bonds is contained in this continuing disclosure agreement. And that would also be approved. Usually, almost always, it's attached as an appendix to the official statement. And I think that covers my quick list of overview of legal documentation. But Doug, if I missed anything, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Nora. I think that's a good overview. A couple quick notes on that. I think in working with Nikki on putting the RFP for special tax consultant together, we did add a component for them to be the continuing disclosure report agent as well. So ultimately it is the district's responsibility to disseminate the information, but you can certainly hire a third party, which is intended in this case to prepare the reports. So that's a function that they would handle as well. And then we did discuss early on the process of getting a trustee bank on board. Since their fees are typically pretty low, we didn't anticipate doing an RFP for that. And it's really one bank or another. It's not a major function. It's really just a bank we need to pick. So,
Right. Good to know.
Yeah, but be happy to answer any specific questions that you have, or elaborate on anything that piqued your interest.
I just had a quick question about our timing. You mentioned that everything might not come together, you know, with bonds being sold and so on, sort of in final stages until September or October. And I just wonder if this project is moving at sort of the typical speed for a new CFD in terms of getting people in place and getting it to a point that yields funds and we can start work. Is this going all right?
Yeah, I think at this point we have I will say, a comfortable schedule if we lay it out that way. Again, we're going to be looking at the market. If interest rates start, you know, moving up dramatically, we can accelerate some portions of it and try to move a little bit quicker.
Okay.
Yes.
And
I have a
if I can
question.
pause just a moment and let you know that member Amy Leifert has joined the call as well. So we've got another member on board.
Good afternoon.
Thanks. Sorry I'm late. Nice to meet you.
Thank
To
you.
meet you.
I guess I'll continue if you don't mind with a follow-up real quick, Doug. And
Sure.
that is, are there any sort of deadlines or, you know, hidden moments like that that we need to be aware of and you know, align our time schedule to meet going forward?
No, nothing in particular. I think the one thing I would mention, Nora already talked about it, which was you should have a debt policy in place before we actually issue the bond. So that'll be something that she'll be taking care of as well. And that can be a meeting or two before we anticipate bringing the bond documents to you. Yes.
Terry, you want to go around and call people or just?
I'm sorry,
jump
I was looking down at that moment, so I did not see the audience here. Do you have a question, Rushmore?
Yes, I do. First of all, congratulations once again on getting the award. We're looking forward to working with you and your team.
Thank you.
Back to the timing for a moment. So we don't anticipate we're going to have the new assessed property values until August. So the timing of getting the rating is going to be predicated, I assume, on the updated assessed values of Aldina. So how is that going to work, and will that tie into the overall time frame? And I have a couple quick follow-up questions, so maybe that first.
Yeah, I think we'll work with the special tax consultant once they're on board and get a quick sense of when those final numbers come out. I know that they're not official till August 10th. I don't recall what LA County does as far as releasing them. I don't know how much longer it takes after that date to actually get them. If it seems like it's going to be too long, we can certainly move ahead with the current values. It's going to be an overwhelming value to lien ratio because of the size of the district. So the fact that we'll have one more year may not make that big of a difference, but we just want to know what the timing will be. But
Right. Okay. No, that makes sense. And then, I'm just going to throw this question out. I know the answer almost positive is this is solely based on the values of the property and not necessarily the balance sheet of the library. And although the balance sheet of the library is healthy, but there is a distinct difference between the two.
Correct. So on a CFD special tax bond, it is the pledge to repay the bonds is limited to the special taxes from the CFD.
Mm-hmm. And then as far as the debt policy, that's something that you would work with us as far as developing, providing input, obviously with input from Nikki and her team as to what the parameters of that policy should be that would be acceptable to the underwriter community.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sure Nora probably has a form of that we can start with.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this is Nora. So there are certain things that are required under that government code section. It's 8855I that was added in 2017. So the local debt policy, and I can just read quickly because it's a brief five pieces, shall include all of the following. So the purposes for which debt proceeds may be used, the type of debt that may be used, the relationship of the debt to and integration with the issuer's capital improvement program or budget, if applicable, policy goals related to the issuer's planning goals and objectives, and internal control procedures that the issuer has implemented or will implement to ensure the proceeds of the bond issuance will be directed to the intended use. So that is what is required under the government code to be included in the debt policy to kind of check that box on that report of proposed debt issuance. And then anything else is just, I think BBK and then Urban Futures have either put together or reviewed so many of these. So anything in addition to that is not required, but we'll work with the district and staff to make sure that what they want in their policy is in there. So it's very issuer specific.
I would think so, Nora. Thank you for that. And just two other quick questions. One of which is, as you probably know, we're interested very much in making the bonds available for residents of Aldina to purchase. And does that factor into the time frame of issuance of the sale of these bonds? And then secondly, as you know, we're going to have this capital projects meeting or this big team meeting, which will include the district's capital projects management firm, as well as BB&K. And I want to get your thoughts about that as far as in that conversation. So maybe let's talk about the sale or the purchase opportunity for the residents to purchase first relative to the time frame, and then your ideas about the meeting coming up.
Sure, and we did talk about that, I recall in our interview, and we've also had a conversation with Nikki about that. In putting together the RFP for Underwriter, we did add a brief section asking them to give us their experience and thoughts on putting together that type of a program. Typically, when they do those, it'll be on along the same timeline as their marketing to other institutions. So it's not something that's going to tie us up or add time to the process. It'll simply
Okay.
be a sort of a subcomponent to where the underwriter will reach out and we'll have some sort of a public outreach program that'll inform the residents that these bonds are available for sale if they're interested. So.
Right. And Doug, maybe don't answer the next question that I asked, and maybe save that to the end, because I think I would like to hear all the other questions of our members, and then that'd be kind of a nice way to end the conversation of what we anticipate for the larger meeting with everyone.
Okay.
So I'm done, Terry. Thank you.
Kim, you have a question?
Sorry, and because maybe I just haven't been staying abreast of things. So the decision on how much of the capital project to do and how much bond funds we need and kind of the timing, has that all happened, or is that happening between now and I think we said we're selling in September? How's that timing playing out?
I can take that question. That's something that we're working with the capital project management firm on. They've been reviewing the ARG reports that had some cost estimating done last year to look at, compare to what they think things are going to cost now, and then like identify priorities in terms of what we think we can accomplish and what that's going to cost. So we're working in tandem with the facilities committee to establish that. It is our full intention to only do one bond issuance. So again, that number's not solid. We've been meeting with them for 2 weeks now, but that's definitely, I think, something that will be discussed at the joint meeting that we're having on June 10th.
And the decision, so like in terms of the decision of what projects to do and how much to finance, is that have a date, if you will? And I'm assuming that the Board of Trustees will sign off on that and have that decision. Is that true? And I don't know if we play a part in that or not.
I mean, I would assume that the CFD committee will have a presentation either by Doug or our capital project managers or a combination of the two to run it by this advisory group and go to the full board with that recommendation. Yeah, we're still in the researching stage of things in terms of the projects.
Any other questions? Bushmore, did you have some follow-up that you? Okay.
No, I would just suggest that before we let Nora and Doug go, that we get their thoughts about the larger joint meeting. If there's no other questions, that is.
Right. So with regards to, actually ties into Kim's comments, with the sizing, that can be something that happens just before pricing. I mean, we can wait a while in the process. Right now, we're sort of moving along with the assumption that your formation team did a good job, and it looks like they have, of sort of guesstimating what the total bond issue proceeds would need to be. We're talking about an issue up to your authority of 24 million. However, as you've probably seen or know from other bond issues, there are costs to be deducted. If we have to set aside a reserve fund, that would be a further deduction. So you get something less as far as proceeds than the 24 million. Maybe it's 22.5 million, maybe it's 23 million. We'll know more as we get closer. But the point of that is, if we thought you needed that much a year ago, likely with construction costs and things we're hearing about project costs, that you'll probably need the full amount. So for now, we're moving along with that assumption, but that can be changed and can certainly be ratcheted back if for some reason the project scope changes. That can be a decision that comes much later. But for now, we'll move along with the total authority until we hear otherwise.
And this is Nora to jump in. The resolution of issuance, which will be approving to move forward and with the bonds and approving those documents, it will set out certain parameters, which are broad, we usually make them large enough so that we wouldn't have to, essentially don't come back. So that would have that full amount in there, as well as we would work with Doug to get an interest rate and not to exceed interest rate that was significantly comfortable enough so that we were sure that it would be under it when you actually go to price the bonds.
Okay. Any other thoughts? To Rushmore's question, do you have thoughts on the joint meeting that we're going to have, including the capital project managers, or other things that we'll cover?
Not from me. I have had a couple emails back and forth with your project team, so I think hopefully they'll be keeping us in the loop as they get closer, and we're happy to participate or comment as needed when those discussions come up.
Well, I guess it'd be helpful, Doug, from your perspective, any kind of agenda items. I mean, I assume that, we'll work with Nikki to create the agenda, but we'd like to hear from you or Nora if you have any specific agenda items that we should have as to facilitate, the most effective, meeting we can to kick this big project off for us.
No particular thoughts right now. I mean, I can work with Nikki and provide input as we get a little closer, but
yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I just want to make sure we have your input to craft this meeting.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, same here. We'll work with Nikki to get a good agenda put together.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I have nothing else, Terry.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there are no more questions, at least at this time, Nikki, would you want to proceed? And I don't know if we need to have Doug and Nora stay. I'll leave that up to you, but.
I don't know, Doug, if you want to stay on since you helped review both of the RFPs in case there's questions about those.
Certainly, yes, I'll be here.
Okay. Nora, I don't think you have to if you don't want to. I'm sure you're busy.
Okay. I would love to stay, but I have a good amount of work. So I will let you all work on the RFPs, and I look forward to working with the district again, and enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
Nora.
to see you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. And I think that would bring us to a review of the RFPs that we have, Nikki, is that right?
That's correct. All right, so first we're going to take a look at the RFP for Bond Underwriter. So as I mentioned in my report, we went into a professional services agreement with Urban Futures on May the 3rd. Within about a week, Nicole and I met with Doug, who you've met today, to talk about next steps, and he definitely emphasized the need for bond underwriting, as well as the other RFP that we'll be reviewing after this. So as you guys are aware, when we did the RFP process for the Municipal Advisor and Bond and Disclosure Council, we created a new template for all RFPs that we issue. I worked with Doug to talk about the scope of work and how to format the cost sheet, because it's different with bond underwriting. I sent this to him for review. He added some feedback, and what I presented in the package for you today is that RFP for your review and hopefully recommendation to the full board to approve. Just so everyone's aware, the timeline is a little bit tighter than usual, and that was based on recommendation from Doug that typically it's a 2-week process to open up and take proposals. So again, we'll post this on BidNet, which is where we put the last two. It would post as long as the board approves on their May 24th meeting. We'd post May 25th with a closing date of June 8th. I would look to Terry's guidance to see if you want to, again, establish scoring teams for both of these, and we'd probably go through the same process as well. So with that, we recommend that you approve this so that we can take it to the full board, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it that you might have.
I got an early look at it, Nikki, from the checking that I did, and I thought it was pretty solid. It's got everything in there I could think of. So I was pretty happy with the way it came out. Any questions or comments? I'm sorry, go ahead, Rushmore.
Just observation, the evaluation period is very short, Nikki. So either you and your team or some of us will be very busy once again. And I just minor friendly amendment to section 6.4, the proposal content experience, where it says number 3, provide a description of your firm's marketing and distribution capabilities. I'm wondering if here we can't be more specific and ask what their marketing and distribution strategies would be for us versus just what their capabilities. I'd like to hear specifically what their thoughts are as to how to do this versus just generally what their capabilities are.
Any thoughts on that, Doug?
Yeah, I think as when we received the RFP, it's sort of a framework. Any of the good underwriters, which we'll hopefully be reaching out to, are going to tailor it specifically to your district. They're going to want to make it look like they stand out. I understand your concern, but I think they will certainly go over and above to make it look like they know what you need and are familiar with your district. So probably don't need to spell that out, but
Okay, that's fine. I mean, I don't want to reinvent the wheel here, but I just want to make sure that when we do see it, I'm hoping, like you said, Doug, they probably will, be very intentional about laying out what their strategy is. I'm hoping they do. If they don't, then they probably have missed the boat.
yeah, and that's another reason to sort of leave it a little open. I think, if you get 8 responses and only 3 of them look like they paid attention to what's happening, that'll lead you in a certain direction. So
Agree.
Doug, I had a quick question regarding this to the distribution. We've gotten about a half a dozen responses from folks on the 2 that we put out previously. Should we expect a robust response for the Bond Underwriter RFP?
yeah, I think, like I said, I mean, I said 7 or 8. There's a certain level of underwriter that'll sort of be attracted to this size and type of issue. I don't think you'll get 20 responses, but I think you should probably get 7 or 8, I would guess.
Okay.
So I was curious about the the way that the RFP will be distributed. I mean, through that web link, but is there a way that you're going to be kind of casting about with firms that you know of, that you respect highly for this type of position? Or for this
I'm happy to
RFP?
do that. And Nikki, I frankly don't recall how we were made aware of the BidNet process, but I think it was an email. But I'm happy to reach out to the people that I think would be a good fit and let them know it's on BidNet if that's how you want to do it, or however you'd like to do it. But I am happy to provide recommendations if you'd like.
Yeah, with both of the other 2, we, through the BidNet process, included specific emails of firms that were recommended.
Okay.
So we can do that all through the software. So if any of you are aware of firms that you think we should invite, please share that information with me and we can include that when we cast the net out through the proposal software. Any other questions?
Question for you also, Doug. You'll be available for, I mean, it does sound like we're going to have a culling process with that many people involved. You'll be part of the team, I imagine, that's taking a look at all this, right?
Yes, I'll be happy to. In the case of the underwriters, the big component will be the cost, but they're all pretty competitive these days, and you may end up with several that are in the same, within a few percentage points of each other, and then it'll come down to other things. What else have they looked at? Have they talked about a marketing program for residents? I mean, there'll be some things we can distinguish between some of the underwriters, but the cost will be a big factor since it's obviously a big portion on a $24 million deal. What they're charging can be a big difference between underwriters. So that'll be that'll be the main driver, but I think we'll want to look at some of the finer details as well. But I'm happy to provide input on that.
That's an interesting question relative to the budget for the marketing. So they're to propose their marketing strategy, but I don't recall we said that we're kind of leaving it open-ended as far as what their marketing budget will be. I guess it's going to be somewhat difficult for them to propose something. I guess they could propose something, but really not knowing what the parameters are as how much they can spend. Any thoughts about that? And maybe this is too much in the weeds at this point, and it can be negotiated later on, I'm assuming. But yeah, just something to factor in.
We've asked for sort of 3 cost components to their total underwriting discount. So they'll break it down and sort of let us know how much is for admin costs, how much is for marketing,
Yeah.
how much they have to pay their salespeople. They factor it all into one price, so they'll give you one discount rate.
You're muted, Terry.
No more questions on this particular item, okay. So we will vote then, take a vote to, it's an action item to approve the underwriter RFP.
Terry, do you want to do them as a sweep or you want to do them individually? Which one's better?
Let's do them individually and then we'll proceed to the next one. So can I get a motion to approve the underwriting agreement as it stands? I didn't hear any changes involved, so.
I'll move.
I move.
Okay.
I second.
Thank you. So let's take a roll call. Member Lyford, aye, or
Aye.
Member Cervantes,
Aye.
Member Kenny,
Aye.
and it's an aye vote for me as well. All right, let's move on to the next one. And Nikki, can you give us any background on that one real quick?
Sure. So in addition to a bond underwriting firm, we also need to hire a firm to do the CFD administration services. Not only are they a firm that we're going to have on board similar to what NBS does for us each year in terms of the special tax assessment and making a presentation to the board about that, but also Doug made us aware that early on they would provide that special tax table and information we need as part of the bond issuance process. So again, I worked with Doug to look at the scope of work as well as any other details that needed clarification in terms of the CFD committee's work. We did add something to the extent of that special tax consultant that would help us with the bond issuance process. And then, moving forward, continued support around the CFD. That would include things like when someone has a question about the special tax lien that's put on their property with the CFD, the administration firm would be the one to field those calls and answer questions. As of right now, that is being done by Nicole and I, because we do not have a firm in place to carry out that work for us. So again, another very important consultant that we need to bring on board with this process. So again, Doug and I worked on this RFP together, and I recommend that the CFD committee vote to recommend it to the full board so we can get that process moving forward.
Are there any questions? Kim?
Is administering the CFD something that kind of outlives the bond issuance and potentially even the bond, because the CFD will exist after the bond, right?
Correct. Yeah. So this administration firm, the way that our professional services agreement is worded is that it will be for up to 3 years, and then potentially we could keep signing them on after that. But again, our professional services agreement is, if there's an issue, we can terminate the contract. But again, this would be an ongoing firm that we work with each year to do the assessment to bring to the full board.
And do you typically, if it's a multi-year, do you typically have a fixed fee for that period, and then it would only increase if you go for a second term, or you know what I mean? Or is there a built-in increase for each of those years?
Based on what I've seen from our current agreement with NBS, who does the special tax assessment, there was a yearly rate, which actually fell under the $10,000, which we have to take to the board. The CFD administration is going to be above that, but I believe it was a flat rate with up to a 2% increase or something like that each year, but nothing like super substantial. So I would assume it'd be the same situation with the CFD administration work. Correct me, Doug, if you know any differently.
Nope, that sounds good.
Yeah, it sounded to me as if any renewals would be negotiated at that point, that you would have almost a new agreement with them when you added on another term or extension. Is that right, Nikki?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, initially some of their work will be able to be paid out of the bond proceeds, but then down the road, it would be more like service and operational money that we're spending out of our consultant line.
All right, is there any more discussion? And if not, can I get a motion then to approve the CFD administration RFP?
I
I'll
move to
move.
approve it.
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. We'll take a roll call again. Member Lyford,
Aye.
Member Kenny,
Aye.
Member Cervantes,
Aye.
and Member Andrews is an aye as well. So thank you very much. Before we proceed, I had a couple of questions for you, Doug, and you as well, Nikki, about, it seems as if when Nora was talking, when you were talking earlier, there's still several positions that need to be filled as we go forward.
Mhm.
And I wasn't quick enough to write them all down. There were banking services. I don't know if that turns out to be a contract that we need to do, and there were a couple of others in there. Should we be, ready to issue 2 or 3 more of these RFPs and make meetings ahead?
I think for now you've got the 2 big ones that are remaining, which are the underwriter and the special task consultant. We talked about sort of a third function was a trustee bank. They will collect the special taxes from the district. They will pay the bondholders. They will potentially hold a reserve fund. There are only 3 or 4, maybe 5 special large banks that provide that function, and we're happy to pass those names along. Actually, what I talked with Nikki about was sort of reaching out to them and getting their fee schedules. They'll all be within a few dollars of each other. They all provide the same services. So it's not something we felt like you needed to go out with an RFP for. The fees will be much less than $10,000. So it'll be just something that we reach out to our usual cast of banks and have someone give us sort of informal proposals.
Okay, thank you. That answered it perfectly, because I didn't know if we would have to mount a campaign to get them hired. It's as simple as changing banks or adding a new bank, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would assume we'll bring that as an informational item once we reach that point. But I'll work with Doug on that.
So that brings us to the end of our agenda, right, Nikki, our action items.
Yes.
In terms of announcements and planning, does anybody have anything, especially in terms of future agenda items that you'd like to put forth right now?
Well, I guess for me, I'm just curious if you want to do the same process for, evaluating the proposers and bringing those forward to the CFD and then the full board, or if that's something that you want just like my staff and our experts to work on and then bring to the CFD at their next meeting. Any thoughts from the committee on that?
Well, I know that we called a special meeting to get that done last time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by my way of thinking, it would be good to have some understanding of the applicants, especially that we might be getting a bunch of applicants for the underwriting services. So I hate to suggest that we would need another special meeting and maybe there's some workaround for that we could go through. But for all of us to take a look at the different things that we get and at least give some feedback to you maybe again, in the way of a chart or something like that.
Right.
A special meeting sort of works for me.
So maybe what I could do is over the next couple weeks, work with Doug to put together the scoring criteria for both. And then maybe we have a special meeting where we review that with the committee. And at that point, make a decision about whether or not we have these larger scoring groups, or if we feel like we just have staff and the, our experts make a recommendation to the full committee next time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. And you think that requires a special meeting again to get that done?
Well, I mean, if the committee wants to review how we're going to score them and provide feedback, then I think it would.
Okay.
Kim?
So there's a meeting on the 10th of June. And then we have our regular meeting also on the 9th, or does one of them take the place of the other? That's what I wasn't sure on as well.
To be honest, with the whole timing of hiring both, I think we could potentially move the 9th. I'm not sure if it makes sense for us to meet on that date or not, but more info to come. But maybe we could try to plan for a special meeting. The last week of May or something like that, to review the scoring criteria and then possibly talk about next meeting. That makes sense. Because I agree with him. Like, it'll be the day before the joint meeting, so we'll have to decide whether or not it makes sense to try to meet before or after that.
So you're suggesting a special meeting for us to look at the review criteria and so on toward the end of the month, of this month.
Yeah.
And we've got our meeting on the 10th that's being scheduled.
That's the joint meeting, yes, with the facilities.
And the meeting on the 9th is one that we don't have to have, is that correct?
Well, it's a standing meeting, but it feels to me like since it's so early and the full board meeting isn't until the 28th of June, that we might want to discuss rescheduling that date on the 9th and maybe meet the following week after the joint meeting, where there might be more to discuss at that point.
Yeah, I think having a separation a little bit between the meetings would be a good.
So I'll work with Terry as the chair and Diego to look at calendars and make sure people are available to do so.
Okay.
So we'll plan to try to schedule something probably either the 25th, 26th, or 27th of May, where Doug and I will present the way that we're proposing scoring for those two RFPs. And then we'll go from there, maybe in terms of discussing next dates.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good. Any other comments or questions? All right. If not, could I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Second.
Seconded, okay. With that, we will adjourn the meeting at 3:58. And thanks everybody for your participation today.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Nikki.
Thanks. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.